In Dynasty, there is no off season. We're going to tell you about how to make some moves to get ahead of your league mates.
Welcome in. Thank you, Austin, for that wonderful intro. This is exciting because this is the first episode of the Dynasty Gambit, the inaugural episode. My name is Ben McCown, or Dynasty Big Mac FF, and I am joined here by Austin MJ, or my friend Austin Jacobson. How are you doing today, Austin?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing great. I'll just give kind of a quick roll through as far as how our year has gone, what has led us to here. And that is, we started off this business as the Super Dynasty Bros podcast and have evolved since to partnering up with the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. And now as the Dynasty Gambit, we are here to bring you our main really baby of this show is Dynasty Game Theory. And we're going to really be, as Austin would like to put things, player agnostic and think about things more as a strategy with Dynasty. So, Austin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's you pretty much covered it. I think the key is we're looking at things from less how does this player compare to this player, and more how does this type of player fit with this type of strategy, and how does a strategy that's moving you in the direction of contending versus rebuilding, what do you do with that? What types of moves can you make to kind of get ahead of your league mates? What kind of things can you do to anticipate ahead of time? Valuing players in a value market, sort of like you would stocks in the stock market. So figuring out what type of player fits with your type of build, and figuring out when to buy certain players, when to sell certain players. And that's the overall idea, is that we're just going to dive into game theory, getting leverage on other teams, how to kind of sustain success, and how to make moves that maybe your league mates won't exactly anticipate what you're doing with us, and be thinking sort of like, the theme of chess that we're kind of going with here is thinking multiple moves ahead. So not just thinking about what does this one deal get me, but what can I do with that thing that I got? And then what can I do with what I get with that deal? So just thinking multiple moves ahead, having a long-term plan, and maybe making some moves that might initially look like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what is this guy doing? What's he building in there? One of those things. And then you come out the other side making small incremental values repeatedly, and you're building a championship contender, hopefully a dynasty. That's kind of the whole point of this game, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And one game that I loved playing growing up, and actually how it was just so fitting that we came up with the name, was chess. And kind of the thing that you described there, Austin, is exactly what you're looking for in chess, and what describes a gambit, right? Like, this idea of a gambit is that you're basically sacrificing something right now to pay off later in the future when your move's ahead, and now you've basically gotten your opponent in a checkmate, right? So like you said, maybe a deal that you do now that it's like, is this going to work out? But then, you had the thought process in the back of your mind of, this is what I wanted the outcome to be. And that is where it's like the checkmate is that fantasy championship. So we're excited to bring this content to you. And we've got some potential topics today to really talk about throughout the offseason of ways that you can zig when your other league mates are zagging. And I guess, Austin, explain a little bit more about that as well. As like, what kind of things are we looking for when we're trying to make these moves, or what is the purpose of zigging when everybody's zagging?
Yeah, I think what it is when there's kind of conventional wisdom that builds, especially in the off season when a lot of people are bored, people are just picking up on any little headline there becomes sort of a sentiment about a player where everybody starts to all of a sudden like a player, or everybody starts to hate another player, just based on small news that probably doesn't carry much weight over a long term. So sort of figuring out when nobody wants to buy this guy because, he didn't show up to OTAs, but you're like, he's going to be there. I mean, how many times do we see? Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we'll talk about him a bit later, but yeah, I think you see a lot of times where it's like, oh, this guy, I'm worried he's on his last year of his deal. He's never going to get another deal. And then, or on the reverse, this 7th round rookie ran a really good route in training camp. I have to buy it. So sort of thinking about, okay, everybody really wants the 7th round rookie. I paid a 4th for him. Can I get a 3rd for him right now? So some of that stuff where you're just looking to sell some good news or buy some bad news. But also more than that, we're going to kind of go beyond that type of thing today and more into like doing moves that are kind of the inverse of what your entire strategy would necessarily expect. So we all know about contenders are supposed to buy. You're supposed to add, Derrick Henry. You're supposed to add Tyreek Hill. You're supposed to add guys that are old, that are going to smash, that are great redraft players, but you're wanting to win the championship right now. So you want those guys. And on your rebuilders, you're getting all your points off your roster, right? You want to get the number 1 pick. You want to sell all your guys. But we have to remember, this is the offseason. This is the middle of June, right? You're not scoring points for another 2.5, 3 months. So there's no reason why you need to have all your points off your roster right now as a rebuilder. And there's no reason why you have to be scoring points right now as a contender, because no matter who you have, you're scoring 0 points for the next 2.5 months. So you can make a move now that might be buying as a rebuilder or selling as a contender with the anticipation of using that trade to make another trade before the season or early in the season or at some point in the future when the value is better. That's kind of some of the topic that we're going to be kind of looking at today and some options on how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're going to talk about selling on a contending team first. I've been trying to, find ways to make these deals throughout the off season. We have one that we'll actually talk about as buying on a rebuilder that I was pretty happy with. And like the idea is that it's always fluid, right? Like right now, all of these rosters that you have, either whether you're doing a startup right now and you just finished, or if you're going into another offseason with a team that you've had for a while, during the offseason, your team is just at that point, it's just about roster construction, right? Or not, sorry, opposite of roster construction. It is about getting the most value for your team. And then when we get to the end season, then it's about roster construction, especially if you know that you have a team that is going to potentially take you somewhere, thinking, who can I get? Where can I use my draft capital and other players to get these pieces? But yeah, that's the fun part of the offseason right now is just making these trades. But Austin, we're going to start on talking about selling on a contender first. Mm-hmm. And we have, we have Dynasty Daddy right here as far as our resource that we use to kind of give us some examples and some ideas that other people have done. But I guess, what's your thoughts on trading a player on a contending team for a first, right? I think you had put it in the show doc as like excess of a certain position or something else like that. But what are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways to look at this. I think most people, when you're looking at a contending team, guys like Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or someone like that, you're looking at that guy as that's going to be a guy that's going to score me tons of points this year. I would rather have him than first. In fact, I'd spend my first to have him on my team. But there's some different ways to look at this. So you could sell that player for what you view as their value in picks, and then potentially use those picks down the line to buy something else. So let's say you have a team that has 6 or 7 really good wide receivers and you only need to start 5. The inclination can be, okay, my wide receiver 7 is, my wide receiver 7 is, let's say it's Adam Thielen, or let's say it's somebody maybe a little higher, like Jawan Jennings. You have somebody like that that's like a solid, serviceable flex. I want to trade those guys, right? That's kind of what people think. I have too many of these, so I'm going to trade kind of these guys at the bottom. But really what you should be looking to do is which players are people willing to pay for and maybe even overpay for. Because what you're looking at is you can always slide in one of those guys, like a Jawan Jennings, into that last flex. And if somebody's willing to pay a first for the guy that's maybe going to score you a few points per game more. Because right now, I know everybody wants to put their lineups in, see the projections. I mean, you already have projections on Sleeper, see where we're sitting. But it doesn't matter. Setting a lineup doesn't matter until September, until the games start. So you could take that. You can trade Evans for 27 first, let's say. And you're like, man, I'm a contender. What? I don't need an extra 27 first. That's 2 years away. I'm not going to be able to use the asset for 2 years. But I think the key is you've got tons of wide receivers, right? You've got Jawan Jennings, you can slide into that last flex. But maybe you only have 2 quarterbacks, right? And maybe they're great quarterbacks. Maybe you have, let's say, you have Josh Allen and Brock Purdy, and you feel pretty comfortable with your team. What happens if Josh Allen or Brock Purdy get hurt? Now you've got an extra first to buy another quarterback. But I wouldn't turn around and buy another quarterback right now. What you do is you bank that first, because what if it isn't Josh Allen that gets hurt? What if your top 2 receivers get hurt and you want to buy back a player? Usually, in most league markets, if a first is the going rate for a guy like Mike Evans, you can buy a Mike Evans in season with that first. So maybe you don't get Mike Evans back, but you get a guy kind of in that same tier. Maybe you get Jerry Jeudy, maybe you get Terry McLaurin, kind of somebody in that same range. And more than likely, now I wouldn't sell guys on a contender for below market rate or even necessarily market rate. You want to look to sell a guy for if you can get more than you think he's worth, even if you're trying to compete now. So if somebody's willing to give you a first plus for one of these older guys that you don't think is going to end up being worth a first plus in 6 months, you can take that, bank it like it's currency, and buy something with that later, even if you're still contending. And so I think that's kind of the picture I'm trying to look at. I want to give one example of what I did in one league. So actually, Mike Evans, this was 2 years ago. I traded Mike Evans for what was a 2025 first. And I traded Matthew Stafford, I believe, for a 2026 first. And then, or maybe it was for another 2025 first. But then I took later in the season, so this is midway down the line, I have 2 extra 2025 firsts. And I traded, I think, those 2 25 firsts, a 24 first, and I think Christian Watson for Justin Jefferson. And I think if you look at that trade, it's fair. Like, it's a fair trade to get. But I think if you had tried to trade 1 first plus Watson, Stafford, and Evans, it would have been a bunch of stuff. And that would not have gotten done, especially because I was trading with a guy that was rebuilding. So you're turning those assets that are harder to get rid of, harder to get fair value for, when you have the opportunity to get good value for them, into something that is then ammunition for you to make a bigger move later. So having 2 extra firsts there allowed me to buy a Justin Jefferson, which is very hard to buy. It's hard to have a bunch of extra firsts to be able to make a move like that. So even if you're not buying, even if you're not using them to buy one player right now, or even in a few months, you hold on to them and you buy when you need, or you buy when there's an opportunity. That's kind of the gist of what we're looking at with this. Do you have anything to add on that strategy?
No, Austin, I think, when we're thinking about trading assets, a first of air is one of the strongest assets that you can attain and give away. And so I absolutely love what you're saying. I mean, when you break apart the pieces of a trade, like you said, Matt Stafford 2 years ago, you got for a 26 first. Now that, you could have sat on that for a couple of years, and that 26 first is so valuable in your league now. So it's all about the timing and absolutely selling when you can on some of these guys, even when they're on a contender. Like if it's Mike Evans and he's sitting as your wide receiver 4, and like you said, you basically could trade him for a first and slot in the next guy, you can absolutely do that and feel good about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that kind of fit this criteria, where you're looking at guys that, I think Chris Godwin is one. We had a lot of discussions in our Discord. We had a couple of people saying, like, on a contender, would you buy Chris Godwin with the 27?
And first? I did. I sold Chris Godwin. If Dougie's listening, sold Chris Godwin for that 27 first. He wanted to put his money where his mouth was.
Because I think there's actually a lot of people that you get in the mindset first of all, I think there's too many people think they're contenders. I think in any given league, I think you have 6 or 7 teams at least that think I have the best team in this league. It's just how it tends to work out. And one of those teams, and if it's like 6 or 7 teams, you have a couple of those teams that probably will miss the playoffs, and then a couple others that will be pretenders in the playoffs. So, everybody kind of thinks they're a contender, and then everybody kind of jumps the gun on buying on a contender. So you trade away your future picks for a guy in June. Even if you think Chris Godwin's worth a first and you'd pay for it in season, I think you're better off not doing that right now. In fact, I'd go the other way. I'd sell my Chris Godwin, my Mike Evans, if you can get good value for them. And I think that the guys that are older receivers carry a lot of risk. I mean, Chris Godwin could come out and smash like he did last year, but more than likely, due to his age, injury history, I don't think you're ever going to get more than a first. So to me, if you can get what you view as max value right now, then you're taking all of the risk off your plate, and you can buy yourself Chris Godwin in season, or maybe not Chris Godwin, but someone in that same range. So you're basically banking that value for later. And especially if you're buying a future pick, more than likely that the value on that pick goes up. Almost always, any future picks go up in value, and any players could go up in value, could go down in value, could stay the same. And it tends to happen with older guys. I mean, you see, like I look at Saquon Barkley, for instance, right? He gets picked in the 2nd or 3rd round of startups. I don't see any conceivable way. He could have a repeat season of the one he had last year, right? He could have over 2,000 yards. He could be clearly running back 1. I don't think he's going to go up in value. I really don't. I don't think there's any conceivable way he goes up in value, because he's going to be another year older, another year further into the contract, another 300 carries on his body. So I'm not saying you don't want Saquon Barkley, but if someone's willing to give you, I don't know, 2 firsts and a rookie running back, or something that you feel like 2 firsts and Caleb Johnson, somebody's like really wants Saquon Barkley, really wants to overpay. Even if you're a contender, I think you take that, and then you can use those firsts to buy other things. You can use, right. You can pretty much buy any running back with 2 firsts in season, more than likely.
Yeah.
So
actually, I just bought Devon Etienne for 2 firsts and Brashard Smith. So it's a good deal on both sides, like you're saying. Like if you're the rebuilder, you have a young shot guy to put your stock into, and then you have 2 firsts now to play with. So
right.
And holding on.
But I would argue that you could make that same trade. You could make the trade 2 firsts and Brashard Smith for send away Etienne on a contender, just because. Oh yeah. I think from a value perspective, Etienne's a little different because he's younger, and I think there is a higher ceiling with him.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a similar concept where you're like, do you think that it's rare that a running back becomes worth more than 2 firsts? So if you're banking those 2 firsts now, you've gotten full value for Etienne. And assuming you're in an active league where people are going to be willing to make trades, there's going to be a rebuilding team, a team that thought they were going to be good, that isn't good, that has some good running backs on it that you can buy with those firsts. Or maybe all of a sudden Brashard Smith is the starting running back in Kansas City, and you have a plug-in RB2 that can then, you don't even need to buy it. You can buy something else, or you can save the picks and draft someone and just really build a juggernaut. So I just think it creates more flexibility. Not that you need to sell your whole roster. I definitely think as a contender, you don't sell your whole roster, but 1 or 2 pieces here or there, if you can get top value for them, I think it's worth banking that excess for later.
Definitely. So we were kind of looking through a little bit of the Dynasty Day trades, and I can share the screen here just to show some of the Chris Godwin trades that we were looking at. And obviously we have other examples as well. Like you have mentioned, Austin, Mike Evans. I think we had in the show doc Devontae Adams, as well as Chuba Hubbard or Ken Walker. Yeah. So this one right here, like when you start to add up and do all of the math in your head on, and actually, sorry, there it is. Okay.
There we go. Oh.
Popped up there for a second. Okay. So if you look at this one at the top right, like this is what we're talking about, of like knowing the value of your player and knowing that you probably can get a 26 or 27 first for Chris Godwin alone, at least. I mean, this person was able to get Aaron Jones, Chris Godwin for 2 firsts, a second, and a fourth. So I think you're underselling Chris Godwin and Devon Etienne at that point, and also actually Aaron Jones. But yeah, I mean, I think there's just so much value to be had in some of these vets that we're talking about. That
I think that one I'd probably rather have the players. I just think that if you're looking at, I think that's probably somebody that's a rebuilder. I think Etienne's worth more than one first.
Yeah,
I like Godwin for one first. That's fine. If you want to look at it as a first and second for Etienne, it's still a fourth for Aaron Jones. So I think I'd lean the players on that one. But I do think that there's, similar deals. Like if you look at this one, I like this one here: the Russell Wilson, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Swift in a second for J.K. Dobbins and 2 firsts. I think that's a way of you're kind of unloading. I don't think any of those players are necessarily difference makers. We saw some flashes from Chris Godwin, but to me, DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins is kind of a similar bet. I like DeAndre Swift, but what's he going to get you? 12, 13 points per game. There's a lot of running backs that'll get you 12 to 13 points per game. And, Dobbins, we expect him to be behind RJ Harvey, but, you're taking a shot that maybe he goes up in value. You can get a second for him. But basically you're getting, to me, Russell Wilson, I doubt he goes through the whole season as a starting quarterback. So you're getting 2 firsts. Basically you're getting Godwin for a first, and then you're getting Swift, Wilson, and a second for another first and another shot at running back. I think that's the perfect example of a trade where, honestly, none of those guys are hurting your chances to compete, losing Wilson, Godwin, or Swift. But you're banking 2 extra first-round picks where very easily, like let's say Russell Wilson was your QB3, you should be able to use a first to buy a better QB3 in season. You should be able to use a first to buy another wide receiver. Or you can add to J.K. Dobbins and buy another running back. So more than likely, if you're a contender, DeAndre Swift, having DeAndre Swift instead of J.K. Dobbins is not going to be the difference between you winning a championship or not winning a championship. And so that's exactly the type of trade where maybe that was a rebuilder. I don't know. But I think you could make that trade. It's a smash, obviously, as a rebuilder. But as a contender, I think you could actually make that trade and store some extra value in those firsts and then make a move down the line.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Ooh. What do you think about this Josh Jacobs, Devonta Smith, and 3 firsts for Ashton Jeanty and Chris Godwin?
That's honestly a good tear down trade. To me, I think that's an overvaluing of Ashton Jeanty. I love Jeanty, but if
you count Jeanty as the 3 firsts, then it would be Jacobs and Devonta Smith. Yeah, and then Jacobs and Devonta for Chris Godwin. No,
that one
give me the picks.
That one is not fair value. Whoever, somebody's a little too obsessed with Jeanty. I think you could substitute any running back instead of Jeanty there. Like if you put Bijan there, I would still take the package over that.
Let's talk about a guy we haven't talked about, and that's Davante Adams, which I think there's a lot of hype in both ways, in both camps, that like you could see Davante Adams being a wide receiver 1 this year versus if this is the time to sell. And I think when you look through some of these trades, what is this right here? 4
I don't see a single one of these where I wouldn't take the picks. Let's see. That first one, I think Barkley's worth 2 firsts, but then you're also getting credit for Hill and Adams each as a first. 4 firsts for those guys.
4 firsts. I think
4 firsts for guys that
for sure.
None of the there's a chance that in 2 years none of them are playing anymore. I mean that's great value, and you can turn those firsts into something else.
Davante Adams, Javonte in the round 3s for 2 firsts. I think I'm taking the first there as well. Like that's Javonte and Devontae themselves together don't equal 1 first, and it's the same for the 3 thirds. So
I agree. To me, anytime you can get, I think in most sharp leagues, you're probably not getting a first for Davante Adams. But if you can combine Davante Adams with another player, I traded, this is a rebuilder, but I traded Adams and Kelsey together for a first in 1 league. And I mean, those are 2 guys that'll probably smash for a year. So I don't necessarily fault the guy for taking that, but I think that's a way that you can sometimes combine assets to also get first round picks.
I love this one. Davante Adams, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes for Rome, Brock, and 2 firsts.
Oh, man, that's an interesting one. Let's kind of break it down. So Mahomes for Purdy in a first. I think I probably like the Mahomes side, but I see where you're coming from there. And then you get, even if you want to say it's Mahomes for Purdy in 2 firsts, I think that if you're a Roma Dunze believer, I think getting him for Adams and Henry is fine. Yeah. I probably would hesitate a bit to that in a contender, but
yeah,
I can see it.
I would not do this. Caleb Williams and Devontae Adams for 2 firsts and a second. I think if you have any belief in the fact that in that Caleb Williams is a top 10 quarterback in Dynasty going forward, you're underselling Caleb and Devontae Adams at that point.
Yeah. And that says 2 QB. Does that mean it's super flex, or is that, I guess it could include super flex, but yeah.
Most times it's super flex.
Okay,
it doesn't ever list it as SF, but
right. Okay.
I would be hard pressed to think that many of these are.
Yeah, I think Williams is worth 2 firsts at least. And then so that'd be, you're only getting a second for Adams. Yeah, those are examples. I think that right now, the conventional wisdom is that people are not willing to sell young players, and there's a lot of old players that people are willing to get rid of. But typically, it's on the other side of that. It's the contenders are thinking about, how can I strengthen my roster? How can I add value to it? My last wide receiver spot is somebody that I think is not very good. I need to upgrade that spot, and you don't need to do that on June 15th. Like, I think there's a level of being patient. Maybe the projections show you only scoring 140 instead of 155 or wherever you think you need to be, but you don't need to set that lineup right now. So I think there's value in storing value for later, and I think that's I could keep saying it, but I think that there's a lot of times people will bristle at the idea of don't spend your capital now, right? They want the best team possible. They want to have the team to show off, but
it's just something also to think about, that like when you receive an offer and that person is really, really wanting your player, and you basically say, no, I'm going to hold. I want to see what this asset is, and then ends up becoming something greater. Like, they're going to be giving you more later on. I've had a lot of examples where somebody goes back in the DMs later and is offering me double what they were offering me the first time, just because I wasn't trying to be desperate and take the first pick that I received. Like, if you believe in these assets and the way that they can grow, try to get more for them. And I think we saw some good examples of selling on a contender, but let's talk about the second half of our show, which is buying on a rebuilder, or what deals you might make in order to get certain players on your rebuilding roster.
Yeah, so I think that what's very interesting about rebuilding teams is that there tends to be like an immediate, like if there's 2 or 3 teams that are rebuilding, an immediate, like, we're racing for the number 1 pick. Like, you're my competition for this. I need to shed as many players as I can. But I think you want to be careful with selling for the sake of selling, to the point where your team is so far away that you're going to be spending 3, 4, 5 years just to catch back up. And I think a lot of teams will sell the entire, like, anything I can get for Devontae Adams, just the first person to send me a second. I don't think you need to do that in the middle of June. So that might be something where in the middle of the year, Adams has been up and down. He looks like he's never going to be worth a first again. You're just wanting to get something out of him. I get that. But right now, I think there's still the potential that you see Adams go up in value. So to me, unless you're able to get a first, maybe 2 seconds, or a second and a young player, I would probably hold on to a guy like Adams. And I think beyond that, I might look to buy some players that I think will go up in value. You had some examples that you wanted to talk about as far as buying potential players that actually are down.
So I think we're going to mention him later, but Dak Prescott, and the crazy part about it, and we've talked about this before, but you look at it and you're like, Dak Prescott, he's 31 years old. Like, why would I buy him on a rebuilder? And this trade just worked out perfectly for me. And I'm not, normally I would have been, and this is how why we try to take our emotion out of it, because I would be like, Dak Prescott on a rebuilding team, hell no. But the idea with this trade was, I had Jalen Hurts on a rebuilder. It's rough. Like, basically Jalen Hurts, DK Metcalf. Actually, Dustin had invited me to an orphan on this with this team. And it was one that I just basically wanted to blow up and just try to get as many picks as I could. I just wanted it to be that kind of fun league with that, right? And at one point I just committed so hard to it that I traded Jalen Hurts and Darnell Mooney for Dak Prescott, a 26 and a 27 first. So Jalen Hurts, probably a wide receiver 3 bordering wide receiver 2 for Dak Prescott and 2 firsts. And Dak Prescott, in the way that we're thinking, right, is he plays a little bit through the season. If you're not contending, you can hold them at any time. And basically when those contenders come to you asking you for that quarterback, when their quarterback goes down, you're the guy that they're looking after, and they're going to offer you probably another first for Dak Prescott. So now you just got 3 firsts for Jalen Hurts and Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. I think I can't tell you how many times as a contender I talk to a rebuilding team, and as part of the trade, maybe as even a throw-in piece, there's some 30-year-old guy that's from my team that I'm sending them, and they're like, he doesn't fit my window. Like, I don't want that guy. And I get that. But at the same time, that's an asset, right? Anytime you can get something that's an asset that is worth anything, add it on to a trade, you want that, right? And I think that there's so many people are just thinking, will this player be on my team when I'm competing? And if the answer is no, I don't want him ever. And I think that's not looking at it the right way. I think you can buy an older player that you think is currently below his ceiling, like below what you think market value will rise to, and then flip that player later. And I think so many people are just looking at, does this guy fit, my window right now? And I think that is not the way to look at it. I think it's, what can I do with this player? What can I turn it into? And so I think for a lot of rebuilders might say, yeah, I don't really want 2 firsts in Dak. I'm going to hold out for 3 firsts from someone else, right? But Dak there's a high chance, and he may even be worth a first now, right? But there's a high chance that Dak will be worth a first in season. And so I think what you're looking at is you basically did get 3 firsts for Jalen Hurts. You just have to be able to look at Dak Prescott as somebody that can move for a first. And even if you can't do it now, early in the season, somebody's going to get hurt and somebody will come by. And I honestly think there's a good chance that you can get a first and a second, maybe even 2 firsts for Dak if we see him return to how he was playing in 2023. I believe he was QB 2 or 3, depending on format. So, the last time we've seen him play a full season, we've seen, him produce. So yeah, you can buy a 31-year-old quarterback on a rebuilding team. And I would argue if someone is thinking, I'm worried about Dak, I worry that he'll ever be the same. And they'll give you, let's say you just drafted Jackson Dart, right? And you're excited about Jackson Dart. He fits my window. He'll be good in 2 to 3 years. From a dynasty value perspective, Dak Prescott in most rankings is ranked above Dart. I mean, it depends on the league, but you probably can trade Dart maybe for 1 first right now, maybe depending on the league. But if you traded, let's say someone was willing to give you Dak Prescott and a second for Jackson Dart, just because, hey, I want to get younger. I'm worried that I'm going to be left holding the bag on Dak. I think that's a deal that you have to take as a rebuilder. It might seem like, man, well, I'm trading away my 21-year-old quarterback for a 31-year-old quarterback, and I'm only getting a second on top. But just the value baked in with, I think there's very low downside to getting a guy that you can almost certainly flip for a first at some point in the future. So I think that you can make moves.
Dak's more likely to produce, right?
Yeah. I mean, almost
not exactly sure. We're not sure if Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart is going to start the season. So at least we know Dak Prescott's going to be starting week 1, and he has the room to grow up and basically grow up in value.
Yeah, can you do some Dynasty Daddy Dak Prescott trades? I'm curious, see some stuff that's been going.
Let's see here. Share my screen right now. But yeah, I think it's definitely. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we have that pulled up here, let's take a look. Actually, hang on 1 second. Okay. So Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb for Drake May and James Cook. All right, let's see here. We're looking.
That's interesting. There we go. Dak Prescott for Jackson Dart and Kyle Williams. That's interesting.
Perfect example.
That might be a little steep.
That's a little overzealous, maybe.
Yeah.
Ooh, Dak Prescott and the 103 for the 101.
That's a deal where I think you could make a trade off of the 101 and pick up. Yeah, actually, I would like the 103 and Dak on that side of that one. Look, some of these Dak Prescott for Tyrone Tracy and Jack Charbonnet. They're one quarterback league.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, Dak Prescott for a 204 and a 304. Give me Dak Prescott.
Look at
even on a rebuild.
Look, which one? Oh yeah, yes, perfect. That's a perfect.
The 204 and 304. Yeah.
Dak Prescott plus 2/3.
Or where's the
for Bryce Young?
Okay,
that's an interesting one. That kind of fits what we were just talking about.
Well, right now Dak Prescott's going in the same round in startup. So give me the 2/3.
Yep, 2/3. You're banking
Dak
extra
Prescott
value.
for Demarcus Robinson. Demarcus Robinson's basically a fourth at this point. So him 207, 302. Give me Dak.
Yeah, that is a 1 QB though. So.
Oh, yep. Got it. Yeah. You know what? Because a lot of our listeners, right? We play both 1 QB and Superflex, but a majority of a lot of our leagues are Superflex. And we're looking at the value for Dak. We're looking at.
And then when we're talking about, I guess I think Dak in a 1 QB is more of a fringe asset that you could take or leave. But I do think that I saw one there, Gino in a first for Dak. I think that's an example of if you can get that kind of value for Dak Prescott, like more of what we were talking about before.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
Where as a contender, I'd be willing to trade Dak for Gino and the first. I think that's a way to kind of tear off banking a first to value, and you're still getting a guy that may actually produce just as well. Like I think that's a good trade where you're taking a lot of the risk off yourself and you're banking something for later.
What do you think of that? That's a tough one right there because Jalen Hurts is so valuable, but Jalen Hurts, Brian Robinson for Breece Hall, Dak in the first.
Well, that's a good one. That's interesting. I think I'd rather have Jalen Hurts and Brian Robinson in that deal. It's close. That's a fair trade.
I think this deal right here, Dak in a second for Kyler Murray, like I think you could almost try and get a first out of that from the Kyler owner.
Yeah. I mean, if I can trade Kyler Murray
from the Dak owner.
I'm doing that all day, yeah.
2 firsts, a second, and Dak Prescott for Terry McLaurin and Justin Herbert.
Well, it looks like 2 seconds and a first.
Yeah. Okay, it is 2 seconds and a first.
I'd rather have Herbert and McLaurin, I think, in that deal. Although I do think you're kind of getting.
If it was 2 firsts,
if it was 2 firsts, I would take the package. But
let's see. Yeah, and actually, a guy that we're going to be talking about.
2 firsts and a third.
Yeah, I think you're about to bring it up. The one with Chris Olave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think Chris Olave is perfect.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're kind of buying. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think I'd rather have the picks. There, but
yeah,
there's definitely some interesting deals. I mean, there's a lot of deals happening. The cool thing about Dynasty is those are deals that happen in real leagues this week, so that's kind of cool
for sure. Because we were kind of talking about the other opportunities to buy guys, and it's the injured players who are coming back from injury. Like we were mentioning Chris Olave, Jonathan Brooks, another option, Christian Watson. These are guys that like they're not worth. They're probably not even starting on your roster for another year or two, but that's the plan, right? And the value that they are at right now and where they could grow, right? If Christian Watson has at least half a season where he's playing without a hamstring injury, like the guy rises from probably a fringe 3rd round pick to being maybe a 2nd round pick, and you've already just cashed in right there.
Yeah.
Jonathan Brooks coming back from injury, and we don't know if potentially he could be the starter in Carolina. We have, once Chuba's deal's up and we've got this thing going on with Etienne, Trevor Etienne coming in, and then Jonathan Brooks coming back from his ACL injury. So those are other.
He's probably not a factor after this year.
Yeah. So actually, I had that pulled up earlier, but like
I would say there's two different kind of. So like a guy like Olave and guys like Brooks and Watson kind of fit into different categories. So I would say Jonathan Brooks, Christian Watson, Tank Dell kind of fit in this category where, to me, these are guys that are not going to play most of or all the season. Christian Watson is a little bit more up in there, but it's looking like both Brooks and Dell are expected to probably miss the whole year. So those are guys that I think if you can buy them right now for some of those guys are worth basically nothing to a lot of people. So if you can buy them for a third or 2/4 and stash them on your IR, they're not going to score points anyway, right? So it's not like you're looking at, I just added points to my team. So those are kind of no-brainers. And I actually really like, regardless of team, regardless of whether you're a rebuilder or a contender, right now there's kind of an opportunity it's kind of a cheat code where you trade a player of very similar value for a guy that's one of the only 6 or 7 guys that are currently listed as IR. If you have an IR spot in your league, that gives you an extra roster spot. And to me, in the offseason, you want to have all your roster spots filled. And if you can fill up all your taxi, fill up all your IR as much as you can, it just gives you extra shots, extra players that you notice you might flip later. So to me, if you can flip a player of equal value for a guy that's on IR right now, do that and then pick someone else up, and then you just got a 2-for-1. But I think that then a guy like Chris Olave is a little bit different because we do expect Chris Olave to play week 1. Maybe 2 is in that same category where there's questions. Rashee Rice maybe is another one. Questions about their health. But they're as of now, they're expected to be back, but we're worried what happens if there's another injury. I think Olave and Tua both with the concussions. There's just a lot of people that are ranking them much lower than probably their value because of the risk built in. And
there's another. I think there's another player with a high ceiling too, right? Like Puka Nacua, because people don't want to invest and say that Puka is basically this top 5 wide receiver asset because they're afraid of the injury history. And I think he's the perfect like almost tier 1 wide receiver to buy into for that while his price is low.
Yeah. I think the key is really, regardless of whether you're a contender or a rebuilder, looking to either capitalize on top value or buy when they're below what you think they should be valued. And I think I think Olave is one really interesting one because, you saw him in redraft leagues going in the 2nd round last year. And he actually started off the season, pretty good, but he's had a couple concussions. But it's kind of like, to me, when you're looking at the game of football, any player can get hurt on any given play. And so I don't want to completely bail on a player that is very talented just because they have an injury history. And I think this is the time to buy Chris Olave. And I think even if you're on a rebuilder, if you can get him, I don't know if I'd pay a first, but if you can get him for less than a first, or if you can package together a couple players to get him, I think that's the perfect guy to slide into your roster. I bought Chris Olave on a couple rebuilders last year after he got hurt, which that's another strategy, but that's a little bit more. That's a little bit more intuitive. Like people understand, like, okay, if they're going to score no points the rest of the year, I'll put them on the roster. But I think you could buy them now, even coming back, because there's just so much concern about him. This one's
great.
This one's interesting. Bijan and Chris Olave for a CD and a first. That's an interesting one. I would take the CD side. Let's see.
See Chris Olave in a second, for Najee a 4th and a 2nd.
Yeah, that's an easy Chris Olave side.
Which one were you going to bring up?
Let's see. Olave. Yeah, there's another one.
Tyron Tracy
in a 3rd for Olave in a 3rd. I think that's the example of where I think Najee is a guy and a declining asset, and you can upgrade from Etienne Coleman to Chris Olave. I would do something like that.
Where did you see that one, by the way, Austin?
It's right there. Etienne Coleman, Najee Harris, 26th.
I see it.
It's like 226, swapping 26 thirds. But basically, it's Chris Olave for Keon Coleman and Najee Harris. I know a lot of people are higher on Keon Coleman, but I think that's a way that you can kind of get something for Najee Harris. I think most people have Olave a tier or two above Coleman. But you're getting.
I'm surprised that somebody was able to get Chris Olave for Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I mean that's
especially now knowing that Cam Scadaboo's there.
Yeah, that's probably an example of a manager that's very concerned and wants to just get something out of Olave, and I think that's the perfect opportunity to get. Oh, look,
Chris Olave 26 first and Jarquez
Olave 26 first, Jarquez Hunter. Wow, that's
yes.
I love that package.
Give me the package.
I like.
I will take Olave. I will take a Igbuka over Olave right there. But
yeah, I think that's a pick your poison. I think on a rebuilder, I want Igbuka. But I have them like right next to each other. But yeah, I think that's the kind of move that it's kind of just whatever you prefer. I think they're kind of they're different bets, but it's sort of there's some risk profile with both. Igbuka, I think it's going to be a smash. It's just a question of how does that wide receiver room sort out. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I think if we're talking about rebuilder, I don't think you want to trade Igbuka for that because that's basically trading a first for a lot, which I wouldn't necessarily want to do because I think that's more at market value. I think you're looking for ways to buy below market value right now.
Yeah. I think another like bucket that you can start to also put some of these things in is we just talked about injuries, but then we also talk about like situations that we don't know what's going on. And some examples that I wanted to include were players like Travis Etienne or, some players on contract years like Jameson Williams or, George Pickens was basically, I believe, signed to a 1-year deal in Dallas. So you kind of almost have to want to trade for the players you believe in, the ones that you think will gain in value for sure. And like right now, for me on a rebuilder, if you're going after Travis Etienne, that's just gonna be found money once he's actually starting on an NFL roster.
Yeah. To me, it's crazy that a guy that was a top 5, producing running back just 2 years ago is being valued kind of in the same range as some of these running backs were. I mean, I think he goes right around Brian Robinson, Zach Charbonnet. I've seen him go below Bashal Tutin in some drafts. And I think you're buying him at an absolute floor. I mean, I like Etienne as a buy low right now. I'd buy him for, if you could, I'd probably pay a second for him, but more than likely, I think that's probably market value. But if you can get him for 2/3, I think that's something that you can almost guarantee to get some value back down the line. I think he's a guy that I would like to buy really on a contender or a rebuilder. I think his value is just people are giving up on him, but he's going to be in a great offensive system with Liam Cohen there.
Yeah, this one right here, 2 firsts in Travis Etienne for Saquon Barkley. I think it's not a bad deal. It might take me a little bit more to get Saquon, but
I could see that definitely. Obviously, I think if I'm a rebuilder, I'm taking that. Question is on a contender, are you willing to roll your dice? I think 2 firsts, depending on where those firsts are projected to be. I think 2 firsts for a running back is usually pretty good value. I think that maybe Bijan, Gibbs, and maybe Genty right now are the ones that are probably worth 3 firsts. But
now this is 8 teams, so this 8 teams start 9. But Jalen Waddle, Travis Etienne for Jalen Royals in a 27 second.
Oh yeah, there's a good example. There's a good example of if you're a contender, you just drafted Jalen Royals in the 3rd round. You have a rookie and you're trading away a future second, but you're getting Waddle and Etienne, 2 guys that I think can both potentially fetch a first if they hit their ceiling this year. I think Waddle could probably fetch a first right now. Etienne, if he ends up being Jacksonville's starting running back, I think he has top 10 potential. He does. I do think that Bigsby and Tutin will work their way in, but you're getting a lot of value insulation there, and you're basically only giving up a second and a third. I like that one a lot.
I just traded DeAndre Swift straight up for Jalen Waddle today. So,
wow.
Yeah, basically I acquired Jalen Waddle. I was very surprised that even went through, but Yeah, people are also very low on Jalen Waddle right now. So another example of like a player we're just not sure. Like he's kind of, he finished off last season not injured, but like he's had this injury history where people are just really devaluing what Jalen Waddle was and what he could be if he played a full season.
I think sometimes people can overrate opportunity for running backs. I think there's been a surge in appreciation for DeAndre Swift because it seems like he dodged a lot of the draft and free agency bullets. But he was incredibly inefficient last year, and I just don't think that Ben Johnson's going to mess around with that too much. If he continues to be inefficient, Roshan will get opportunities. The new rookie Kyle Monangi will get opportunities, or they'll bring someone else in. I mean, maybe he takes a step forward. Maybe he goes. I mean, he had a pretty good year in Philly 2 years ago. But I do think that Swift is kind of getting gassed up a little bit because it's like, well, they didn't sign Chubb, they didn't sign Dobbins, they didn't draft anybody before the 7th round. But if the reason you want a player is just because you feel like there's nobody else, I'm not sure that's a bet I want to make, especially if you're trading away a young wide receiver that we've already seen have top 10 finishes. Yeah, I would waddle side on that all day long.
Buying an aging, like, less productive running back is usually not a good deal for in general to trade a productive wide receiver like that. And yeah. I mean, when
James
look
Cook,
at it,
you've mentioned him a few times. I've seen him. I think we had I forget, maybe it was Dalton in our Discord was telling us that he drafted James Cook in the 7th round of a startup. And to me, like if all the concern about the contract is pushing him down into the tier where you're drafting, Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon, I mean, that to me is a smash. If you have an Alvin Kamara or a Joe Mixon or somebody or David Montgomery, and you can trade them straight up for James Cook because the James Cook manager is scared of a holdout or scared of him being traded. I mean, even if he does hold out, even if he doesn't even play this year, James Cook is a guy that how many touchdowns did he score last year? He was.
He was on base at the beginning of the season. Like I had to. I mean, I would think like it's double digits.
Yeah, no, he had. I'll look it up real quick. 18 touchdowns last year.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So yeah. So I mean, that's a guy that he's not gonna never be an NFL starter again the year after scoring 18 touchdowns. I mean, he is gonna, if he doesn't end up in Buffalo, he's gonna end up going somewhere else, and a team's gonna give him a chance to play, be a starting running back. I do think they'll get the job done. I do think that they will find a way to, sign him to a longer term deal. But even if they don't, he'll go somewhere else. He'll produce. He's gonna be a starting running back. And
he was the RB.
Maybe you're saying there's some risk there, but I mean, guys like Kamara and Mixon that are going around that same range, assuming that that holds up, that they go in the 7th round, and they're 1-year bets anyway. So I think that if you can catch some of that panic from a contending manager, it's like, man, I'm worried that he's going to be worth nothing this year. Give me Kamara for him. And if you're a rebuilder, I wouldn't say, oh man, I want to wait. I want to get first for Kamara and take James Cook right now. I would do that all day. Even if you have to add, I might add a third. I might add even a second potentially to get a guy that has the potential to be worth multiple firsts if he figures out his contract situation. And then it's one of those things where if you're a rebuilder and he holds out and doesn't play, hey, just hold on to him. I mean, then you won't be points against anyway. And then you've got those Kamara points off your roster. And Cook is not gonna never be a starting running back in the NFL again. That's just not gonna happen. He's gonna get a job, even if he leaves Buffalo. So I think I think the panic is overblown on him right now.
Yeah. No, I think we gave some great examples of guys that are kind of being faded by the community and ones that you can go and get. And whether you are selling on a contender or buying on a rebuilder, like we talked about, just trying to figure out a way that maybe you can zig when everybody else is zagging. And I think just being able to be kind of the one that's ahead of your league when it comes to those scenarios, because then you're the one that's reaping all the benefits. Any other thoughts with that, Austin?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different ways you can go with that. And I think the key is not to be too caught up in what you are right now. So I think a lot of people want to know in the middle of June whether I'm a rebuilder or a contender. I think right now you're just looking to accumulate value. I think you said earlier, like right now, it's not really about roster construction. It's about accumulating value. I'm the one way I might tweak that is that it's right now it's not about setting a lineup. I do think roster construction is always important, making sure that you have a proper amount of value and it's sitting in some of the right places, and you know potentially what you will need and evaluate your roster as a whole. But it's not at all about, like, it doesn't even matter if you can set a lineup today. It's about accumulating as much value as possible. You can sort that out over the next few months. And again, assuming you're in a super active league, you can make a trade that leads to another trade that leads to another trade before the season even starts. So there's a lot of different, again, thinking multiple moves ahead. What can I do with what I get from this trade? And you're not committing to this asset sitting on your team forever. If you trade for a future pick, you're not committing to making that pick 2 years from now. You have that value. You can move it for something else. I think that kind of sums up, regardless if you're either a contender or a rebuilder or you don't know, the offseason is about accumulating value and not about finding positional needs.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good way to kind of wrap this up, right? Like, we kind of encapsulated everything, and that's really what we want to leave you guys with is like, we are here to kind of help you navigate the ways that you can have that roster construction, or ways that you can make trades to make your team better throughout the off season. And then by the time it comes to during the season, looking at the trades that you can make that are going to best fit putting it together a starting lineup or close to the season. Right. And it being our first episode, a lot, there might be some new people watching the pod for the first time, or some longtime listeners that we've had as we were growing the show. But our Discord is continuously growing. We have a great community on there where people really bounce ideas off of each other. We've created great community within that Discord, and it's really kind of our baby, in the sense that we've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into working with our audience. So if you guys are listening and you want to become part of that community, please feel free to reach out to us, whether that's on our social media or any way you can find us. On X, I'm Dynasty Big Mac FF, and Austin is Dynasty Austin MJ. And as well as, if you're looking to find us on YouTube, if you're looking to find us on TikTok, you can just look up the Dynasty Gambit. And like I said, if you want to get connected to the community Discord, just reach out to one of us and we can help you get in.
Yeah. And we're super grateful for the Fantasy Sports Advice Network to be part of that team. FantasySportsAdvice.com. We're going to be putting out content through their YouTube channel. It should be fun. I think we plan to do some shows analyzing some listener trades, and just kind of talking about the strategy behind it. I think that's kind of a plan for the future, like talking about some different trades, talking about some potential like ways to rebuild rosters or to make moves that kind of can build contenders. And we talk about different things related to that. I think that would be super cool way to get listeners involved. But yeah, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. We're looking forward to this next chapter and building the Dynasty Gambit and helping you guys win some fantasy championships.
Awesome. Well, Austin, thank you for joining me tonight. Everyone, have a good night.
Yeah.